Luke chapter 18, beginning with verse 31, this is the word of the Lord. Taking the 12 disciples aside, Jesus said, "Listen, we're going up to Jerusalem, where all the predictions of the prophets concerning the Son of Man will come true. He will be handed over to the Romans, and he will be mocked, treated shamefully, and spit upon. They will flog him with a whip and kill him. But on the third day, he will rise again." But they didn't understand any of this. The significance of his words was hidden from them, and they failed to grasp what he was talking about. Thus far, the word of the Lord. You may be seated. Listen, we're going up to Jerusalem, where all the predictions of the prophets concerning the Son of Man will come true. He will be handed over to the Romans, and he will be mocked, treated shamefully, and spit upon. They will flog him with a whip and kill him. But on the third day, he will rise again. But they didn't understand any of this. The significance of his words was hidden from them, and they failed to grasp what he was talking about. I want to deal with today when you don't get it. But just look at somebody and say, "I don't get it." When you don't get it. One of the predominant revelations of the God of the Bible is that the God of the Bible is the God who speaks. In the very first chapter of the first book of the Bible, God is revealed as the God who speaks. And from Genesis 1 all the way through to Revelation 22, God reveals himself as the God who speaks. But God is just not revealed as the God who speaks, but also as the God who speaks to his people. What the scriptures seek to tell us and to teach us and to assure us is that a revelation and a relationship with God is one that is characterized by God speaking to you. And I don't know about you, but I'm encouraged to know that the God who speaks is also the God who speaks to me. And I love it when God speaks in ways that I understand. I get excited when I hear God's voice and know exactly what God is saying and meaning. I am elated when God proclaims and declares to me, and he does it within the realm of my comprehension. And Major, it would be wonderful if all of the days of my life were days when God speaks and I understand what God is saying. It would be great if God always spoke in a manner that my mind could fully conceive what my ears were hearing. But I have to be honest with you and admit that that hasn't always been and is not always the case. The God who speaks and the God who speaks to me doesn't always speak in a way that I can fully understand. I wonder, am I by myself? I wonder if there are others who can testify that the God who speaks to you does not always speak in a way that you fully understand what he is saying. And it isn't that God speaks in a language that I don't know or uses words that I don't know. It's just sometimes I can't get what God is saying. Today's passage assures me that I'm not by myself and that I'm in good company. The disciples of the Lord Jesus Christ, those who were chosen after a night spent in prayer, those who walked and talked and lived with Jesus, they had the very same experience. In the midst of their life with Jesus, there were instances when Jesus spoke and they clearly understood what he meant. In this chapter alone, chapter 18, it's filled with Jesus speaking to his disciples. He utilizes parables to reinforce key truths. He tells a parable about a widow who refuses to be ignored by an unjust judge to show that we ought to always pray and not give up. He uses the story of a publican, a tax collector, and a Pharisee both being in the temple and both praying to demonstrate the difference between one who comes humbly before God seeking mercy and that person leaving declared right with God, and the other being self-righteous, trusting in himself, and he leaves condemned. The disciples understood Jesus' words about receiving children, as well as how hard it is for those who put their trust in riches to enter into the kingdom. But after all of that goes on in chapter 18, Luke tells us that Jesus takes the disciples aside and he says to them, listen. That one word ought to let you know he's about to drop something heavy on them. He says, pay attention to me. Listen. Don't ignore what I'm saying. Listen. Focus on what I'm about to tell you. Listen, he says, we're going up to Jerusalem, where all the predictions of the prophets concerning the Son of Man will come true. He will be handed over to the Romans, and he will be mocked, treated shamefully, and spit upon. They will flog him with a whip and kill him. But on the third day, he will rise again. And then Luke gives us this observation. Luke says, but they didn't understand any of this. The significance of his words was hidden from them, and they failed to grasp what he was talking about. While the disciples heard what Jesus was saying, they did not understand what Jesus was saying. They didn't get it. They did not grasp it. Their minds were not wrapped around it. And you got to understand, this was not the first time Jesus had spoken these words. This was not the first time that Jesus had told them that he was going to be betrayed and handed over to the Romans and beaten and crucified and then be raised on the third day. This was a repetition of what he previously said, and with his repeating it, they still didn't get it. See, friends, walking with Jesus does entail Jesus speaking things beyond your comprehension, because Jesus speaks what is the mind of God, and the mind of God is beyond our ability to understand. In Isaiah, God puts it like this: my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways. As high as the heavens are above the earth, so much higher are my thoughts than your thoughts, and my ways than your ways. Isaiah would testify himself that there is no searching of God's understanding. Luke highlights this period in the life of the disciples with Jesus, where they did not understand something that Jesus spoke on multiple occasions. And it alerts us to the reality of our not understanding things that the Lord may speak, even with him speaking it multiple times. And there are those of us who don't mind admitting that there were multiple times when the Lord was saying something to us specifically, repetitively, absolutely, and we did not get it the first, the second, the third, not even the 10th time that he said it. Alicia Sholey observes that when God says things that we don't understand, we are called to fast our trusting in our own understanding. She observes that we have the tendency to make rationalism king, that we are prone to elevate rational thinking to the place of prominence and priority. And therefore, if we don't understand it or grasp it, if we can't wrap our minds around it, then we are prone to deny it, demean it, discredit it, or dismiss it. How often has it been the case when there have been something that the Lord has been trying to say, and because you didn't understand it, you sought to deny it, demean it, discredit it, or dismiss it. And while that may work in other cases, it does not work with God. For try as we might to deny or dismiss what God says, we can't escape what God says. Why? Because God keeps on saying it. God does not limit what he says to the level of what we understand. God does not reduce, he does not dumb down, he does not water down, he does not shrink, he does not narrow, he does not shorten what he says to fit our ability to catch what he's saying. He says what he says as he says it. And in those instances, what we are being forced to come to know is that in those cases, it's not for our understanding, it's for our belief. Sometimes we don't get what God is saying because God is not speaking to our understanding, he is speaking to our faith. God is speaking to us and he is calling us to believe him even when we don't understand him. And when that happens, the question is raised, do we believe God even when we don't understand God? In other words, do I need to understand what God is saying before I accept what God is saying? Now, right now, every adult in here knows the experience of parents saying things to you as children that you did not understand. And at that point, the parent was not speaking to your understanding. The parent was speaking to your trusting the parent to know what the parent is talking about, even if you don't know what the parent is talking about. And even when you did not know what they were saying, you were being called to believe that they knew what they were saying. And there are those of us who remember when after our acting out of disobedience, because parents all went to the same school in order to learn certain things to say to children, that when you were caught in your disobedience, the parent then said, you must not have believed what I said. Now, the parent did not say that you must not have understood what I said. The parent said, you must not have believed what I said, because the parent was not speaking to your understanding. The parent was speaking to your faith. That is, even if you don't get what I'm saying, you better believe that I mean what I'm saying. And it's the same with God. God speaks to our faith in him. Faith empowers you beyond the level of your understanding. Faith lays hold to the faithfulness of God who is beyond our understanding. Faith says, God, I trust you to know what you're saying, even when I can't fathom what you're saying. God, when he talks to you beyond your understanding, he is calling you to heed the words of Proverbs 3, trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not to your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he'll direct your paths. When God is speaking beyond your understanding, he's calling you to faith it. It's Abraham being called to leave where he was for a land that God would show him. It's being called to offer up the son of promise as a burnt offering. Even when God says it's through that son that I'm going to bless the world. It's being called to lead, to head in the direction of a sea at flood stage when you don't even have a boat. It's being told to march around walls that are too high for you to climb and too thick for you to bring down, and believe that if you just march around them and shout when God says shout, they'll fall before you. you. It's going into a dry place and being told that you're going to be fed by a raven, or it's being a widow who's only got enough food for one last meal and being told to feed the prophet first and know that you'll be taken care of. It's being given 2 sardines and 5 biscuits and being told to go before 5,000 men, not counting women and children, and believe that that's going to be enough. Faithing it is being told to fill out the application for school when your grades are average and your money is low. It's applying for the position when your resume is spotty and your references are few. It's stepping out and venturing when all that you have is an idea and nobody sees what you see. It's bringing the tithe unto the Lord when you know the bills that you have. Faithing it, Jesus knew where the disciples were. He knew where they were in their understanding, and he still said what he said because he was calling them to trust in him. When God speaks a word that's beyond your understanding, God is saying, I want you to get me, even when you don't get what I'm saying. The disciples did not understand what they heard Jesus speaking, and while that was the case, if you check the record, they kept on following. Because their call primarily was not to understand Jesus, it was to follow him. It was to be with him. And inherent within that call was to trust him beyond their understanding. And Jesus' charge was to lead them beyond their understanding. His charge was to grow and to develop them and to mature them. And friends, understand this, transformational leadership never leads you at the level of what you can currently grasp. Real leadership, it always pushes you beyond yourself. It always moves at a pace that is faster than you can currently move. A good, physical trainer will always press a weight upon you that is heavier than you can currently lift in an effort to grow you and develop you. And therefore, Jesus, he did not dumb down or water down. He just kept on saying what he was saying. And he kept on saying what he said. And he was not just speaking to their faith, but he was also speaking to their future. Because Jesus knew that what they didn't get now, they would get later. While their immaturity kept them from getting what he was saying now, if they kept growing with him, if they kept growing in him, they would get it later. And therefore, Jesus just kept on saying what he said. Friends, in times when we don't get what God is saying due to our immaturity, God is speaking to our future. Now, there are those of us who can recall parents or grandparents, because again, they went to the same school, saying, you may not understand this now, but you will understand it later. Or they put it like this, you may not thank me now, but you will thank me later. What they were saying is that our maturity, our immaturity rather, kept us from understanding and appreciating some things in the current moment. But they still said and did what they did because they were speaking and doing not just for our present, but they were speaking and doing for our future. They trusted that we wouldn't be 10 or 15 years old always. That there would come a time when in our 20s, our 30s, our 40s, or maybe even as late as our 50s, when some mileage got on the tires, would bring us to a level of understanding that teenage years could not provide. And just as Jesus spoke to the future for the disciples, and as parents speak to the future for their children, so also does God speak to our future. God speaks a word, he utters a truth, he plants a seed, he births a vision that we don't get in the present. But God says you will get it in the future. God keeps speaking it, and God keeps showing it as a part of the process of stretching us and growing us. And he keeps on saying it because while we don't understand it, he doesn't want us to forget it. He says the time is going to come when in your maturity you will catch up. You're not going to be 10 or 15 forever. And can we not stop and pause for the cause and say, thank God I didn't stay 10. Thank God I didn't stay 15. Thank God I did mature. Thank God I did grow up. Because where would you be? What kind of life would you be living if you were still thinking the way you thought at 10 years old? Understanding the way that you understood at 15. But God says, no, there's going to come a time when you've spent enough time with him, lived enough years, traveled enough miles, seen enough things to understand what he's been saying to you all along. And am I talking to anybody in here who can say, I'm so glad that I've lived enough years and traveled enough miles and had enough experiences to understand God better now than I understood him before. And can I just tell somebody right now that God has sent me to let you know what you don't get now, you will get later. And what you don't understand now, you will understand later. They did not get it then. They didn't get it the next time that Jesus spoke it in Luke 22. They did not get it in Luke 23, even when Jesus was crucified. It was not until you get to Luke chapter 24, until the resurrection, that the disciples understood and understand what Jesus was saying. It wasn't until Peter and John entered into the tomb and saw that it was empty that they understood the scriptures that said Jesus must rise from the dead. It was only, my God, when they saw a tomb empty, and later on when they saw Jesus himself, and he says, I am risen, and he shows them the prints in his hands and on his side and in his feet, that they really get what Jesus was saying all along. They understood it then. They caught it then. They grasped it then. And here's the story. Once they got it, they ran with it. Once they got it, they stood on it. Once they got it, they proclaimed it. Once they got it, they defended it. Once they got it, they sacrificed for it. Once they got it, they put their lives on the line. Once they got it, they shared it for others to get it. I'm glad that they got it, because they got it. They were able to share with others who got it, who were able to share with others who got it. And then one day my mama got it. And because my mama got it, my mama was able to start talking to me about it. Lord have mercy. And because my mama was able to talk to me about it, the environment was set so that when the preacher started talking about Jesus betrayed into the hands of sinful men, being crucified and being raised on the third day, I had an idea of what he was talking about. I did not get it the first time, but my mama just kept on talking, and the preacher just kept on talking, until one Sunday I believed it for myself. One Sunday I faithed it. I didn't understand all and could not have explained it all, but I knew that God loves me, and that he sent Jesus into the world to die for my sins, and that God raised Jesus from the dead. I could not explain everything, but I did know Jesus loves me. This I know, for the Bible tells me so. Little ones to him belong. They are weak, but he is strong. I just believe. I could not explain how God did it. I just believe that he did. I just believe that God did it, and God took me at the point of my faith, and God saved me. God forgave me. God rescued me. God delivered me. God redeemed me. God justified me. I wonder, am I talking to anybody? Is that anybody else's story? Can you testify that when you heard the gospel, you may not have understood everything about it, but you just believe the fundamental truth that God loved you, that God sent Jesus to die for your sins, and you can't explain how God raised him, but you just believe that God did raise him from the dead, and that he is alive forevermore. Is there anybody in here who can say, I'm so glad God took me at one level of faith, and God has grown me to other levels of faith? Lord have mercy. I've been walking with the Lord now for 48 years, and I want to thank him for speaking into my life. I want to thank him for speaking to me in ways that I got and in ways that I did not understand. I want to thank him for speaking to my faith and for speaking to my future. And is there anybody anybody here who can testify and say, I understand some things better now than I did back then. I understand even the youth shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They'll mount up on wings as eagles. They'll run and not get weary. They'll walk and not faint. I understand that better now than I did before. I understand I had fainted unless I had believed to see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait on the Lord and be of good courage, and he will strengthen thine heart. I understand that better now than I did back then. I understand no weapon that's formed against you shall be able to prosper. I understand it better now than I did back then. I understand weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Better now than I did back then. I understand I was young and now I'm old, but I've never seen the righteous forsaken, nor his seed begging bread. Better now than I did before. I understand counting all joy when you fall into diverse temptations, knowing that the trying of your faith works some patience, but let patience have her perfect work, that you might be thorough and complete, lacking nothing. I understand that better now than I did back then. I understand, and we know that all things work together for the good of them that love God and are the called according to his purpose. Better now than I did back then. High five your neighbor and say, neighbor, I'm so glad that I understand some things better now than I did back then. And there are some things I still may not understand. Some things I still might not be able to wrap my mind around. But I believe that what I don't get now, I will get later. Beloved, now we are the sons and daughters of God, and it does not yet appear what we shall be, but we know when he shall appear, we shall be like him, for we'll see him face to face. Stop fight with your neighbor and say, neighbor, now I see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I'll know even as I'm known. I may not get it now, but I will get it later, because I can testify we're tossed and driven on the restless sea of time. Somber skies and howling tempests all succeed a bright sunshine. But in that land of perfect day, when the mists have rolled away, we will understand it better. By and by, when the morning comes, when all the saints of God are gathered home, we'll tell the story, how we overcome. We'll understand it better. By and by, all the tears, all the heartache, all the struggle, all the disappointment, all the confusion, you'll understand it better. By and by, every rejection, every setback, every obstacle, every pain, every hurt, you'll understand it better. By and by. So stop by with your neighbor and say, neighbor, what I don't get, what I don't understand, I'm going to put my faith on it. I still believe God. I still trust God. I still rely on God. And he's never failed me yet. So I'm going to put my faith what I don't understand. Yeah! Tell your neighbor, let's face it. We walk by faith and not by sight. But one of these days, the faith will be sight. So keep on walking until you get it. Keep on serving until you get it. Keep on pressing until you get it. As a matter of fact, tell your neighbor, I'm not just going to put a faith there, but even when I don't understand, I do know that God is worthy. So not only will I put my faith on it, but I believe a praise on it.